go. So should I just go ahead and read the dial-in message, Irene?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and say thanks everybody for coming today. I'd like to state for the record, this meeting is being conducted by telecommunication pursuant to the Brown Act waivers provided for under the governor's executive order in response to the COVID-19 state of emergency. Regarding public comment, members of the public wishing to make a comment, please raise your hand on the application or on your phone by dialing *9 during the public comment period. You will then be unmuted for your public comment. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. So with that, we will move on to item 2, communications. Have there been any additional communications, Irene?
No, I have not received additional communications.
Okay. Well, at this time, we'll move on to public comment. Members of the public may comment on any matter not on this agenda today. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Members of the public may comment on items on the agenda when the subcommittee considers that item. To make a public comment, use the raised hand icon on your smart device or desktop computer, or dial *9 if you're using just your telephone. Are there any public comments on items not on the agenda?
No raised hands, Chair.
Okay. All right. Since there is no public comment, we'll move on to approval of minutes of May 5th. Mr. Mayor, had you had a chance to review the minutes as well?
I have, Madam Mayor, and recommend approval as submitted.
Okay. Agreement. Great job on the minutes. Great summary of those issues. And with that, we will move on to item 5, current items under discussion, presentations on the self-healing communities model. And Irene, do we have Rebecca on the phone?
I do not see her yet.
We don't see her yet. Okay. You know what? Why don't we just move on to item B then until she's able to join us? So that's I'm not sure I agree with the title, dissolution of landscape and lighting districts. I think I gave direction, and there was some agreement amongst the council members, but I think it was more, you know, look at what would be necessary to possibly dissolve them, but also, you know, look at other possibilities in dealing with our current landscape and lighting issues. Who would like to handle this?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to. Oh, it looks like Rebecca joined us. So if you want to jump to that, or if you want to go ahead and handle this item first.
Well, you know, since she's with us, let's go ahead and check in with her and see if she's ready to give her presentation. And Irene, had you conferred with her? Is she able to be a presenter and share her screen with us? Great.
Yes. So I will stop sharing.
Okay.
And then Rebecca, you have full authority there, so you should be able to share and speak.
Oh gosh, nobody should give me full authority. Well, sorry, good afternoon. I'm trying to actually get my video started. So Melanie, I did see your email about maybe moving my portion closer to the discussion of reopening and recovery, so is that no longer on the table?
Let's unmute you, Melanie.
Oh, you're absolutely right. So you want to go closer to, and I marked it on a different copy of my agenda. Let's see, where is that? Where do you want to be on the agenda?
I think I put like 5, 2 or something. It was just
near closer to E for recovery, closer to E. Okay, yeah. Then we'll reverse ourselves again, and we'll go back to dissolution of landscaping and lighting districts. So that's going to be David. We're off to a great start, everybody.
Thank you. I apologize. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, well, just a brief overview on this item. it came before council to accept the preliminary engineering report at your council meeting in first council meeting in May, and there was some public comments expressed and concerns about the level of maintenance activities that were being performed, particularly in the cottages zone of the landscape and lighting district. And it's important to point out that there's really just one landscape and lighting district, and that the respective areas are all zones within the landscape and lighting district. So it's not always obvious, because sometimes we refer to them as landscape and lighting districts, but it's really one district with multiple zones. The concern I think that we see is because annually we need to bring forward both the preliminary engineering report, conduct a public hearing, then a final engineering report. It gives an opportunity for the community to, express their concerns or have input on projects and activities. And most specifically, it seems like there's a lot of focus on the actual amount of the assessment. And because of the process, every year it has to come before council and receive input or provide for a venue for community members to speak their opinions on the preliminary engineering report and ultimately the final report. I think council wanted to look into evaluate, potential alternative models that might address some of the community's concerns. So I think the direction from council was to place this on a subcommittee. So, and as you indicated, Madam Chair, was to evaluate potential alternatives or ways you might address some of the concerns that are expressed around the assessments. So we can certainly note that for future agendas, a more broader agenda title, so that it gives you more flexibility on considering how you might want to discuss this item going forward. But I guess the context is, whether the committee wanted us to evaluate any particular alternatives. Some alternatives that we can certainly evaluate would be, whether we could do an RFP, for example, to see whether we could contract out the services that are provided by in-house staff. One other alternative would be to look at a model where the residents agree to transition to an HOA or some other association or assessment model where they have direct control and management. And then maybe last but not least, do we consider actually dissolving that particular zone in which we seem to receive a lot of resident input because of their concerns. The latter alternative tends to be a little tricky because of the perspective that ultimately there are parcels are areas within the zone that are owned by the city, and currently the expense of maintaining those, for the benefit of the landowners, are borne by those landowners. So if it was dissolved absent any other mechanism to maintain those properties, it would become a burden of the general fund more than likely, or not be maintained to the same level that the residents might otherwise desire to see. One kind of background is this year we deviated from the process of engaging the community like we've done in the past. I think that's reflective of the fact that we're in this COVID-19 emergency, and because of physical distancing, we didn't do our normal outreach process, which would have been ideal an ideal opportunity for the community to weigh in on their perspectives about the maintenance and management activities. within the zones. And the other thing too that I think this year in particular, some of the comments that were shared at the council meeting may have reflected the fact that we our maintenance staff, our parks staff were, really focusing on essential duties. So, some of the otherwise routine maintenance activities, which contributes to the aesthetics of the landscape areas, was not performed like it had been in the past. And so, I think some residents saw that, and it's an opportunity for them to express their concern. And since that time, and I've received other correspondence from other residents about the maintenance activities, and I have to say Hector has been very proactively responding to and addressing neighborhood concerns from residents within the L&L zones, and really I think goes out of his way to take their input and address their concerns very, very quickly. And I've seen a lot of positive feedback since that meeting from residents who have since seen the park staff be able to conduct their routine maintenance that was somewhat delayed this year. So that really concludes staff's overview, but we're happy to discuss further and entertain any ideas that the council or the subcommittee would like to review or discuss.
I have a couple of suggestions, but I'd like to hear from the mayor if he has any input on this item. Of course,
Yes.
Understanding that he lives in one of the he lives in one of the areas, so of course he'll recuse himself from that.
Well,
that area.
let me just say that the area or the zone that we get most of the feedback from is the cottages. And as this item is on the agenda, I'm viewing it as short term and long term. And the short term is to get this year's approved and get the answers that Dan has been looking for with the topics that he brought up. And I think, Susie, you might have that list of what he was looking for. But we do owe, before we approve this at the next council meeting, I think we have to make it clear how we came up with some of those numbers that he was questioning. On the long term, it's to come out with some type of a plan of what to do into the future. Do we outsource certain segments of that zone? David, you had mentioned that it gets a little confusing from time to time because some of that land is owned by the city. But I would think either way, we would be reimbursing them for that portion, just like we do up at Vintage Meadows Lighting and Landscape District. So, I'd like to tackle it from two approaches, the short term, the long term. The short term is getting this year approved, getting Dan's and the other residents there, getting their questions answered, and then take on a long-term approach. How do we outsource some of this, get the approval from the residents, whatever they want to do. They can work with a mom pop landscaper from town, settle up on what they want to do, and we'll just administer the funds if we can. So that's where I'm coming from on this.
Yeah, I like that approach of, let's address this short term and then look at a longer term plan. It seemed to me, listening to, some of the concerns and the idea that, you guys never come here, or I've never seen them working. It's, some of that is our responsibility because we're not communicating clearly what the current conditions are and what the work plan is. And I think that some of the concerns can be addressed with a simple dashboard online. to say that this is what the schedule is and this is what the work plan is for, the next couple of weeks. This is what, or this is the time frame of the things that we typically do in these locations, and then this is where you can expect us. This is when you can expect us to address it, and then having the capability of staff to be able to upload before and after pictures, just to let people, because otherwise, kind of what I was hearing were just kind of a lot of claims about, well, I don't like the way this is done. You guys are never, and then of course we hear the other side is that you guys are doing a great job. Whenever we have a problem, you're right there and responsive. So there isn't any final arbiter of the facts until afterwards that, Hector does a verbal report or something like that. And that's not really easily shareable with the residents. So I think that, just like so many things with the city, that if we are proactively communicating and posting this stuff posting information on a dashboard, it helps make sure everybody is on the same page. So I'd like to see us move forward with that. I'm glad we're not doing landscape and lighting districts anymore, because, what we've heard from several of our consultants is that they are completely out of fashion, and they're out of fashion for this reason, is that they're difficult. But I think that if the neighbors saw how much it would actually cost them to maintain it at the level that the city does, barring COVID-19, barring unusual circumstances, I think that most of the neighbors would have sticker shock, and they would be very happy with the service that they are receiving. So I think that if we can just do as part of our reporting is that, this is the standard that we meet, and then this is how much it would cost you, per month or per year, and it would likely be significantly higher. I think that that's going to go a long way to, kind of educate the homeowners the value of what they're really getting. I don't think that they really understand the value of what they're really getting, and that's why some of them are unhappy. So that's kind of the direction that I would like to see us move toward, not just in this instance, but a lot of city services, is being able to produce the data to show the value that people are actually getting for their tax dollars. I think that that's really important for us moving forward. So that's kind of, as part of our goals and objectives, that it definitely falls under, the council priorities. So I think that we need to fold this into to that priority. So, and Mr. Mayor, did you have anything else to add on that, or any other concerns?
Well, the other thing too is, you're right, we have to communicate better with them. For example, I would expect their costs to go up, especially with respect to the labor. I mean, we give our employees a COLA increase every year. That's passed directly to them.
Yeah.
So there's hidden costs that they really don't see. But I have to agree, we need to communicate better with them. So, yeah.
Okay. Great. Does that give you enough direction, David, for moving forward?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we want to first and foremost address the comments that were received, on the actual report itself. And for the subcommittee, just want to share that I think a couple pieces of information. One of the comments was about the way in which employee costs are allocated to the budget. And I think the method that was recommended by the commenter, Mr. Bracciolini, reflects, actual costs billed to the budget. And the issue with that is that the actual cost billed to the budget would come after the fact. And so we're still in a position to have to estimate and forecast employee costs. And then, there's no way to basically, budget it as you go, so to speak, as Mr. Bracciolini was alluding to. The method that we use is to have our parks maintenance staff bill all of their actual time and track all their actual time spent in a spreadsheet that then is used to conduct a 3-year rolling average. And so what it does is it actually helps, it has a smoothing effect, both up and down. So you're not, you're not projecting a lot of work one year, or you're spiking it, and a little less work next year, you're lowering it. It really smooths out the rates. And just like we do as a city with PERS, we think that's, a beneficial strategy for the residents to for us to employ that smoothing effect for labor costs. And we believe that the speaker on that issue is fully aware of that. And I think he's just trying to seek, whether he can find, in any particular year, a cost reduction. And again, it's going to lead to, more spiking in the rates. And given the way, again, these assessment districts are set up, it's not really akin to billing after the fact. So basically, what payroll does is they take 1/26 of the cost that it's allocated to employee costs and bill that, every cycle for paychecks, and that's kind of what I think Mr. Bracciolini was referring to. The other issue that we did determine, and it was raised by another commenter, was why there was such a significant increase in the water expense. And unfortunately, what we found was there was a mistake in last year's budget, because it shows as a tremendous increase from $22,500 to $33,500. Really, what we anticipated budgeting was $32,500, which was going to be reflective of the actual water costs. So we really only increased the water budget $1,000 from what we anticipated. It's just there was a mistake last year, and it looks like a large jump. And we can explain that to the commenter. So those, to me, were the two most kind of substantive issues that were raised during the public hearing relative to the existing report. So we can certainly respond. I know Susie and Irene have already been working on responses to some of the commenters outside of the actual engineering report. But I just wanted to make sure the subcommittee was aware of our perspective, their staff's perspective on the engineering report. But in terms of the long term, I think, Madam Chair, you're absolutely right. We need to figure out how best to provide a dashboard for the community. The tool we were using was a weekly update, and it's always including pictures. And I'm not sure that the folks in the landscape and lighting district zones were aware of that, because I thought that it provided a good summary of everything our park staff was doing on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I don't think that that's the best way to get that information out there, though, is those sporadic emails. I mean, it really needs to be a web-based dashboard or something done on social media that shows a running history in reverse chronological order, so that all of those questions get addressed. So I said that to you and your predecessor.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stand by that. Right. And I just have one other comment. I'm interested in kind of throwing it back to the mayor as well. And that is that, as far as basically what you're doing is you're kind of doing you're engaging in rate smoothing, as opposed to us seeing spiky differences from year to year. And that's a public policy question. And I'm in favor of the way we're doing it. And even though, we do have one member of the public who objects to it, I think that most members of the public would rather see a consistent billing and have that rate smoothing year over year than seeing things go up and down. Because, I mean, most people who pay their pay their taxes, they expect those things they expect it to be predictable. And we're actually providing a service and doing it very professionally. So it's a philosophical difference, but essentially what it comes down to is it's a public policy decision. And I think that we're doing it in such a way that most of, I know I'm a homeowner, thank goodness I don't pay HOA fees, or I don't, pay the lighting and landscape fee. But if that were the case, I would want that number to be fairly predictable and smoothed over time, so that I know exactly, what I'm going to be paying. So did you have anything else to add on that, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you. David, wasn't there a question also in reference to the electrical boxes that we also have to address at the meeting?
Yeah, Mr. Brecciolini did raise the issue of the cost of the utilities. The current budget and last year's budget had a line item of $650, and he did correctly identify that there were 3 existing meter boxes that were no longer needed to service the zone, and the savings from those was very minimal. I think it was something around I don't remember the exact number, but
$2.
It was $100, Susie.
It was $2 for each assessment, so it would have been $300.
And so the question was, do we back that out, and then it ripples through the entire preliminary engineering report and reallocates all the costs differently. And Coastland basically said it's going to cost you just as much to redo the report as it is going to save the money. And really, the money will stay within that zone. So it's not, again, it's a couple $100 of savings that will stay in the fund balance that will then be reallocated next year. So when we looked at it, Mayor, we said it didn't seem like it would generate the benefits of making the change, given the line item overall in the whole budget pretty small.
Well, we need to make that quite clear to them that we're not just wussing over their $300 overcharge, that it's still in their bank of money, in their reserves.
Right.
And I think that's where the focus has to be. Not that the fact that it's a little amount, it's only $300. That's a lot of money to some folks, even though when you boil it, when you break it down per household, it's probably a heck of a lot less. So.
Yeah, it's $2. It would reduce. So if we were to remove that, had we done it at the beginning, it would have reduced the assessment by $2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just need to know that it's still within their reserves there. So
Right.
It's not like we're cheating them out of $200. So
Right.
thank you.
No, that's a really good point. We just need to communicate a little bit more clearly, and that sounds good. So is there anything else on this item, Mr. Mayor? Or?
No, I'm
not,
fine. Thank you.
If not, we'll move on to item C, local preference
Oh,
policy.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I do have one public comment on this item.
I apologize. Yes, public comment. Please bring it on.
So we have Mr. Cox on the line.
All right, good afternoon. As you know, I've been part of this discussion from many different avenues, chairs and such, and I understand how this works. However, when I saw this on the agenda, it just described it as dissolution of lighting and landscape district, and that might need to be addressed to those that might think that might be an option. It would be an expensive and very difficult process to carry out, even if it was a desire of the residents, because it would require not only a majority, but a supermajority, if not a complete 100% vote to change. So I think that needs to be addressed to those people that brought it up. But that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, the not well titled, but given the mood after the council meeting, I can see why we came up with that language. Okay. So any other public comment, Irene?
No other comments.
Okay, great. Then we will move on to item C and local preference policy.
Madam Chair, this item was placed on the agenda at your request. I think it was a follow-up from the previous meeting as a way to ensure that the city has appropriate policies to support local businesses in bidding and public procurement processes. There was no specific direction other than to place it on the agenda so that we could have a conversation around that. I do believe we have in our municipal code some language that would support a local preference. It's Title 3, Section 08.060, which provides for local preference for discretionary purchases. And that is where purchases that are exempt from competitive bidding shall be made by suppliers or contractors located and or doing business in the city, so long as we determine that they meet the city requirements. What we don't have, which some cities have, is a percentage difference spelled out in our municipal code, where sometimes local vendors may come in at a slightly higher price, but they're given a percentage reduction to see, for example, you'll often see 5%. So if they're say 4% higher and you give them a 5% preference, it often will make those bidders, the local bidder, the lowest cost bidder. The basis for that kind of determination or support for that kind of language is based on supporting local businesses that generate other benefits, including sales tax revenue and or employment. But right now we do have just the basic language, but we don't have an actual preference percentage built into our municipal code.
Oh, thank you, David. Yeah, the reason I brought this forward is I think it's going to be a key component of our economic recovery plan. So I'd kind of like to see it talked about in that light. Just looking anywhere we can for anything that we can do to help the community. Maybe we, partner with the chamber and see if they have any good suggestions on this as well. And we'll see if we have anything from the mayor that he'd like to add, and then also, be opening it for public comment. So did you have anything, Gus?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. That's a practice that we've been trying to do, particularly with our vehicles, with the police cars. We try and spread those out between Cloverdale Automotive, Southards, Randy, so we always try and shop local, practice what we preach, but maybe we might want to consider taking it a step further, in the sense that 19 is going to be with us for a while, and businesses are going to be looking to purchase their supplies. I'm not sure if the city wants to get into a situation where we bulk purchase with the chamber for supplies, and then in turn, the businesses could possibly get a reduction on those costs. Maybe do something along those lines. I don't know what else to do at this point.
Maybe we can open it up to any member of the public who has a comment on this. Do we have anybody?
Currently, no hands raised, Madam Chair.
Okay. Yeah, but if we could maybe have some ideas from staff come back, and maybe we can confer with the chamber. I think it's going to be an important part of recovery going forward. So I'd like to, if we haven't, let's see what we're not doing. Let's see if we can do more. That's kind of what I'm asking for. So maybe we could, bring some ideas back to the next subcommittee meeting. That'd be all right. And yeah, maybe Kevin can delve into some of this for us, what other cities are possibly doing.
Certainly. I don't know if this is possible, but I had this idea that maybe, I don't know if we could require developers to purchase locally. Again, this is not a vetted idea. It's just a spitball. But just say like someone like Baumgartner who needs, 1,000 doors and windows. What if he purchased those through West Coast Doors? I don't know if it's something that we could, compel him to do, or just he would do if he could get a good enough deal. Anyway, things like that. We can bring back ideas. Certainly, I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, I think that would be great going forward. Just seeing, what's already out there and what's possible that maybe we're not taking advantage of, because I think we're gonna need a very we're going to be fighting a lot of different fronts in this battle and this economic recovery. So I'd like to, just, see what we can do, see what's possible, see, what other cities are already doing that maybe we're not doing. And I like that idea of, working with developers on, well, if you take advantage, if you use this local preference, then you get this. Or you get this concession or something like that. It makes them, eligible for, either different rates or something like that. So just to kind of, I think we're going to have to get really creative and do everything we can to keep our local dollars local. So, okay, I'll look forward to seeing what everybody comes up with. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. I guess we'll move on to item D, Kingdom Development Funding Request.
Madam Chair, I asked for this item to be placed on the agenda late last week. It really came from Kingdom's request for another consideration of sort of a backstop loan from the city, from our inclusionary housing, which there's not enough money in there to cover this loan request. The idea was similar to the one that was presented in February, where they would never really act on the loan, but they needed it to get the tax credit financing. We discussed that internally and kind of concluded that we really can't do that with the help of Myers Nave, Jose, and Stephanie Downs. But one of their concerns was they are seeking the Section 8 vouchers, which we requested them to do, and they are doing. There was a little bit of a timing concern in that the tax credit financing application is due July 1st, and that really makes up the bulk of the financing for the project. It's something like 80% of the money to build the project. Kingdom was feeling like they didn't have a strong application, then they needed more local support. We've already given, in my opinion, as much as we can possibly give to this project. And I think we've been more than generous in my experience in doing a few of these projects. And so they were requesting that we so the Section 8 vouchers weren't going to be issued until after the day of the application for the tax credit financing. And so that's why they were looking for this backstop. But since that time, the county has actually moved up the day that they're going to be awarding the vouchers. So if everything goes the way it looks like it is right now with the County Community Development Commission, this project will be given 23 Section 8 vouchers, which is just it's a lot. It's great. It's more than any other project on the list. And that provides them sort of a long-term financing stream, because it's called a project-based voucher. So that's money for each unit from the federal government. And so it really kind of worked itself out between late last week and now. And I don't know what compelled the county to move up their Section 8 voucher discussion, but that's going to be at the Board of Supervisors on the 9th. Tomorrow is the Community Commission, which I'm a part of as the city rep for Cloverdale. we're going to be making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. As I mentioned, the recommendation is 23 Section 8 vouchers for Cherry Creek. So if everything goes the way it's planned to go, they're going to be in a really good position to get their tax credit financing and pursue construction of the project. That's kind of an update. I don't think when we put this on here, we had kind of a different idea of what we would be presenting, but since the county has kind of changed their and advanced, moved up their Section 8 voucher award program, there's really not much for us to do other than, cross our fingers that nothing will change between what's being recommended by staff and when the Board of Supervisors actually makes their decision.
Yeah, Colleen had actually contacted me about that and I think she was inviting me to come, and I have to chair a meeting at the exact same time. So I don't know if Gus can tune in, but yeah, I can't make it tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So I guess just fingers crossed. It sounds like it's actually moving along in the direction that they wanted it to. So
Yeah.
Tomorrow is just a recommendation from the community board, and then it goes to the Board of Supervisors. So that might be more of an important meeting, but typically the community board doesn't change the staff's recommendation too much, and I'll be there to advocate for the project. So they could make the project work with less than 23. 23 is much better for them. So, I mean, that's pretty much a Section 8 voucher for each unit they're building, which is a really good deal. So hopefully that happens.
oh, that is great. Did you have anything else, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. I guess Colleen was calling everyone to see about advocating for the vouchers at the meeting tomorrow. But I think she called me first, Melanie. So, but with that being said, Kevin, is that at 10 o'clock tomorrow? And could you send me?
You can zoom in on that. If that's the way to say it. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Typically.
Yeah, I think it's a really good showing to have the mayor there. So thanks
Yeah.
for doing that, Gus. Yeah,
No,
I would do it if I didn't have to chair a meeting. So, and it's a budget meeting, so I can't get out of it.
No, I understand. It really is important. So if you could send me that information, I'll go ahead and make sure I zoom on tomorrow. Also, you and I had discussed, Kevin, that you thought maybe this would be on the supervisor's consent calendar as opposed to a discussion item for next week.
Yeah, I have not confirmed that. I know it's going on, I think, June 9th. I don't know if it's consent or not. I don't know if they've made that decision. The staff report is done, but they do need to fill in the blanks on what's going to happen tomorrow for the city's committee in terms of a recommendation. So I'll send you that information, Mayor, and usually not a ton of people speak at those, so it should go pretty quick, and I think your input would be very valuable.
Okay. So when do you think, well, I don't know, lately maybe it's better I don't say anything, but I would like to at least be present in case it starts to go sideways. But if you could send me that information. And when does the agenda go out for the supervisors meetings? Does that have to be out by Thursday or?
Usually goes out Friday, Mayor.
Friday? Okay.
Yeah. But we'll keep an eye out for it. And I just had it up on my screen, so I forwarded it to you. It's a WebEx.
Okay.
So if you don't have WebEx on if you want to do your iPad, you can download that as an app. It just makes it easier when you click on it, and you'll hear Kevin participate in the public hearing on the amendment to the action plan, which is likewise is an important item because it's a discussion about how the county would plan to provide for utilization of CDBG dash what they're called CD funds, which is a discussion that obviously we're all engaged in to try to ensure that the city gets its fair share allocation of CDBG money. So there's obviously benefits to hearing that discussion. And then the next item is the project-based vouchers. Just an additional comment to Kevin's comment, our view is that it's nice to see that Cherry Creek, of the 100 Cherry Creek is recommended to receive all 20, for all 23 units, project-based vouchers. And we would receive the largest number of project-based vouchers under the recommendation. So, I mean, I can't see the award changing much unless, they allocate, because these are all all the entities that are listed are all that qualified, so they might change numbers around a little bit, but there's tremendous certainty that there'll be a positive recommendation for project-based vouchers, which again is like a 20-year funding source for the project.
Well, if how many vouchers are available? 100?
100.
And how many were requested, Kevin? Did everybody get their wish list, or are people cut back that they'll stop crying at the meeting?
I don't
know that.
I'm sorry?
I don't believe that Kingdom and Cherry Creek requested. Maybe they just went for the gusto, but they were telling me on their phone call that they could make the project work with 13.
Yeah.
So they have some wiggle room. If that would be what I would think would be the only thing that might happen. The county did an RFP. They said, hey, we've got this 100, submit your projects. They vetted them. They went through all of them. This is their recommendation from, reviewing them, using the criteria. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I think the worst that would happen is they might take a few of them away, which, they've got 10 to play with to still make the project work. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they'll just get the 23 and they'll be in a really good position to get the tax credit financing.
Okay.
Right. And of the 100 that they're going to vote on tomorrow, that's out of a total of 348. So they have a lot more to disseminate in the future. So it's looking really good for the Cherry Creek project, in my opinion, because again, it's financing for 20 years. It's a real income flow for the project.
Yeah, and we know we want to use our housing money for other projects and not focus it all on one. So, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Kevin, for all your hard work on this project. I know it's been a bear. So, I know this is mostly an informational item, but are there any public comments, Irene?
Raised hands, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Well, with that, just Rebecca, do you want to go first before our items, or do you want to go after items E1 and 2?
I'm going to defer to you at this point, since I obviously already started a conundrum at the beginning of the call.
No problem. It keeps you're keeping us awake at after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, well, why don't we go ahead and do these 2 items, and then we'll hear from you about how you're going to help us address these 2 items. You want to do that?
Sure, that sounds great.
Great. All right. So who would like to take item E1? City Manager, is that you?
The discussion initial steps for reopening.
Great. Go for it.
Okay. So there's a lot of movement on the shelter-in-place order. We are anticipating that the health officer is going to move us forward in phase 2 of the governor's 4-phase program, possibly as soon as the end of this week. And so we're obviously tracking it closely. There's obviously been quite a discussion from the Board of Supervisors and the sheriff around its enforcement. Of course, most cities like Cloverdale are continuing to support enforcement of the shelter-in-place order, but we'll continue to track the changes, and we anticipate it's going to provide businesses, additional opportunities to move forward with their opening, with the caveat that they continue to employ a number of the health protocols relative to physical distancing, face masking. If anybody's test positive, obviously quarantine and isolate, but also other protocols that include for employees conducting temperature checks, and that's something that as staff we're working on our own internal protocols for reopening is how to ensure compliance with the health officers' health protocols, and ensuring that the folks that do report to work do so by certifying that they're not, they're basically not experiencing any of the designated symptoms of COVID-19. So this is something that continues to be in flux quite a bit, and we are responding accordingly and trying to work closely with obviously the chamber to make sure they have the information necessary to get out to the business community, because I know a lot of the messaging is somewhat confusing, and they're really looking for, I think is the word said earlier, certainty, so they really understand the environment in which they're working. So that's kind of where we're at. I again will anticipate that we'll more than likely hear before the end of the week some further updates on the shelter-in-place order and more allowances for businesses to start the opening process.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the mayor?
No, Madam Chair, thank you.
Okay. Any comments from the public, Irene?
At this time.
Okay. Should we move on to item number 2?
Okay, well, today I sat in on a conference call about a set of events that's being planned or proposed and planned by the Alexander Valley Film Festival. There's a real interest in utilizing the Citrus Fairgrounds for a drive-in movie theater events, and Ms. Catherine Hecht is really working collaboratively with representatives from the Chamber of Commerce, the Performing Arts Center, as well as other groups outside of Cloverdale like Corazon to provide an event in the community that would provide some local opportunities to get out of the house, but to still do it in a safe manner, and still try to promote activity in our community that would be supportive of our local nonprofits. And it was kind of an initial discussion today on how these groups can work together and collaborate while providing an opportunity for the community to participate and maybe watch a movie, or even maybe having some kind of live performance that is then video streamed that they can be watched in like in a movie drive-in theater type setting. So they're obviously trying to do it very carefully in a way that ensures compliance with the health order, but also to make it economically work so that it's feasible and enable our local groups, including Friday Night Live and the Cloverdale Arts Alliance, to maybe be able to support it and generate some revenue. Again, all those details are being worked out, but that's kind of a local event that would then promote local community and also trying to find a way that would support our local nonprofit organizations in a positive way. So there's additional meetings that are going to be scheduled and set up to discuss development of that further. And I know Catherine is a real great business mind, and she's really reaching out to all the appropriate authorities, including our police department. She's reached out to Lieutenant Parker and Chief Ferguson on ensuring that it's compliance and that coordination with our nonprofits. So could very well be something that provides a nice opportunity for our community to come together in a safe and healthy manner.
Oh,
That
thanks
kind of covers the local events aspect, but there's a lot more that we can talk about in terms of planning and building processes and housing resiliency and tax. It's up to you, Madam Chair, if you want to dive into any one of these areas. We're happy to share with you what our thoughts are.
Great. Well, any questions from the mayor?
Well, just along the lines of local events, David, I shared with you, I think it was on Monday, that the high school seniors had requested to use the plaza on Friday evening. Their plan, they're going to be having a drive-through graduation ceremony at the high school. The cars will be lining up on Jefferson, making a right-hand turn onto School Street, going into the little turnout that they have at the high school across from where the district office is, jumping out, getting their diplomas, and then they want to drive down and come to the plaza on the Broad Street side, where they can get out of the car, walk up on the stage that we have in the plaza, and have pictures taken. And David has agreed to let them do that. I emphasize the proper protocol for masking, for safe distancing. It starts at 5 and it should only last about an hour and a half. So.
And Mayor, I heard that information with our senior team, both Chief Ferguson and our city engineer, and our team completely supports the plan, and we're there to help in any way we can. I don't think it'll have any negative impacts. And it's obviously a way to help support the graduating class of 2020.
Right. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at the Citrus Fair, but all the banners are displayed on the chain link fence, and it's pretty impressive. And I think I think that I saw pictures of that in the Reveille as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Chair.
Do they want the banner that's displayed on the street? Do they want that placed like on the stage, behind the back of the stage, maybe for the photos, or have they specified anything that they'd like for the stage?
Actually, they've made their own banner for the stage.
Oh, great. Okay.
And they're going to be hanging that. So.
Oh, good. Okay, so we can leave that one
Yes.
that's facing the boulevard. Oh, good. Good.
Right.
Oh, that's great. Oh, they sounds like they've got it all worked out.
They do.
So great. All right. Any other comments or questions, or are there any public comments, Irene?
No comments.
Okay. I think we're going to have more at our next meeting, because I think we're in limbo right now until we get the new orders on Friday. David, we're not going to know where we are until then. So I think that's why there aren't a whole lot of questions right now.
Well, it just kind of on a side note, I was on a mayor's call today, and the mayor of Santa Rosa was on that phone call also. And he kind of alluded to the fact that, the good old days when we only had homeless to worry about.
Did he? Yeah.
Yeah, he's down there with the riots and with 19 trying to enforce everything. So anyhow, I'm glad he saw some humor in that.
Well,
the good old days.
He's been showing a lot of really good, strong leadership too at Santa Rosa. I think that, he's got a great relationship with the force, and since he's a former policeman himself, he has a lot of respect from a lot of people. So I think we're kind of in wait and see mode on these two items, but I guess we can make sure that they stay on the agenda for next time. So with that, I think we'd like to hear from Becky. She has some tools for us for the recovery. So you want to go ahead with your presentation, Becky?
Sure, thank you. And if you don't mind, I'm just gonna sidestep, take a liberty here just because I haven't seen everybody. And so it's just nice to see you all, Irene and Susie. Chief Ferguson, thank you so much for your service right now, for sure, in the climate that we're in. And Gus and David, I'm so sorry, I put 10:30 on my calendar last Wednesday. So next time you guys gotta poke me, be like, hey, do you have the right time to meet? So anyway, just really quickly, before I get started on the self-healing communities model, which way back in February, I did a presentation to City Council, and I realized that's like forever and a day ago, it seems, at this point. So I kind of want to just go back a little bit and bring us up to speed and then move forward into a little more of the detail of how that works. I do just want to say from a health action standpoint that we're changing leadership a little bit. And I have been recently appointed to the Mental Health Board by Supervisor Zane. And so I'm going to be stepping back a little bit with Health Action, and Amanda Ferrara, who is a local Cloverdale resident, will be moving forward into the facilitator position. And so I'll still be with the committee, but I'm going to help support her to take more of a lead on this, since now my time is a little bit more taken up by that new appointed position. So, but to that end, I also wanted to invite you to our mental health board meeting, which was supposed to take place at the Cloverdale Library this month, June 17th. We will still have it. It will be a Zoom meeting, and Supervisor Gore will be present at that meeting. So I just thought I would bring that to the majority here's attention. But anyway, let me do a share screen. Oh, and sorry, Kevin. Hi. You haven't aged a bit. You look great. You look fantastic.
Months ago. I hope I didn't age.
No, you haven't aged at all. Not at all. Irene, it says I cannot share my screen. A host disabled participant screen sharing. Which it's not vital. Oh, now I'm the host. Okay. Big responsibilities. All right.
See if that helped.
Yeah, I can. Yes, thank you. Okay, let me find. Here we go. Okay. So this is not in your agenda packet, but this was part of the presentation back in February, just to remind people, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And these are sort of the three major categories and the 10 different experiences that one could have in their lifetime. And if you'll remember, the more you have, inevitably, the more effects there are to your physical health, mental health, emotional health, all of that. So just kind of wanted to refresh the group on what those were. And from there, I think I will go to what is actually in your packet. So the first page in your packet, again, just kind of walking through what is ACEs and the experiences that affect our human development. This study, again, just to recap, was done by Kaiser and the CDC. It was very large, over 17,000 participants. And these were all of the things they were finding, doctors were finding, and other sorts of medical people were finding. And then as you move down to kind of that nice circular pie chart, this is the darkened areas show the percent of each of those problems that is caused by an ACE, by an adverse childhood experiences. So you can see that those things vary in range, anywhere from, you know, job injury and illness all the way to like depression or mental illness or suicide. So the level of severity of all those things are greatly different, but ACEs kind of is underneath all of those. And again, just for your packet on the next page, it's kind of starting at the process. So one of the asks that I had was to kind of come back and dig a little bit deeper with you. Both the mayor and chairperson Bagby talked earlier in this meeting about another subject entirely, but both of you spoke about proactively communicating with city residents. Gus, said something about communicating better around a specific topic. And so really this is, again, this idea of changing communication, about changing from asking what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And just that shift in how we look at things and how we perceive things and ask questions when looking at this model is kind of the focus. And certainly very relevant in our climate right now, and being able to see very frankly the divisions within our society, whether it's Santa Rosa. I live down here, I live downtown, and the last few nights have been very unnerving. And I applaud Cloverdale for having a peaceful protest on Sunday, but there was certainly quite a bit of dialogue on that Community of Cloverdale Facebook page prior to that protest. So it's very clear that how we're communicating with each other makes a really big difference. And what we come to the table with in terms of our own personal experience, our own ACEs, whatever they might be, does guide our decision-making, our values, and what we do and how we act as adults. So this process is broken up here into basically 4 steps, as you can see. And remember, the idea here is that I'm not wanting to propose something extra to add onto everyone's plates. This is, as you look at reopening, as we look at resiliency, as we look at Cloverdale, how can this framework or model fit into, or scaffold, if you will, some of these other decision-making processes and conversations around these decisions. So the first idea here in terms of leadership expansion, these are folks that are actively engaged in the community. So they're probably not necessarily always in the places that we would normally look to. So again, city government, police force, educators, those I think are sort of the easy places to go and look for actively engaged people. But again, I think as I see time and time again on social media, there are some very actively engaged residents in Cloverdale, and whether one chooses to maybe define them as a positive or maybe negative influence, or they are still leading, they're still active. And so that's kind of speaking to this idea of expansion. And then finding focus. So groups come together, community members come together, and they discuss this kind of understanding of values, what's important to Cloverdale, what's important to the people of Cloverdale. And again, part of the self-healing community model, the question that's always brought forward in talking about focus is, what do you want to see for your children in Cloverdale? What do you want your children to have, and what their community will look like? So that the idea is always very much future oriented, and that these kinds of questions will help work to change sort of the status quo stuff that happens, right? So we kind of have patterns of thought, patterns of action, patterns of communication, and trying to work our way out of those ruts that we all get ourselves into. The third being that iterative cycle of learning. So it's constant reflection, constant interaction, coming up with ideas or hypotheses, testing those, engaging the community on that, whether it be door-to-door campaigns, whether it be small focus groups, town hall meetings, any of that kind of format works in this case to be able to bring new information or perspective to a particular topic. And then lastly, of course, there's the results and just the local participation in some of the outcomes of the cycles of learning and the data that's collected, and then how it's used to generate further thought. And so as you can see with the circle, it just kind of keeps moving back around. You might have a learning section of community conversation, then you get to your results and you find that maybe you don't have the right people at the table. So you expand the leadership by inviting in another community member that might add a new perspective and thus change the focus. So that circle continually moves in the direction that the arrows outline. And then moving into the principles, I think they kind of speak for themselves, but this is just the integrity of the model, right? So you always have to have principles that we kind of base everything on, and these are the 6 that are in your agenda packet. You know what? I realize Bob is on this call. I should probably share this. I'm sorry, Bob. I'm like talking Greek to you right now. Let's see. How about a new share? Or do you see it? Oh, there we go. Oh,
It was in the agenda packet.
is it working? Okay. I just wasn't sure if Bob had it, so I was trying to include all. So yes, so the 6, again, inclusive leadership, downward accountability, learning communities, emergent capabilities, near informed engagement. So again, the self-healing communities model is based on science. So this is not a kind of haphazard sort of, this is a demonstrated scientific model. Right fit solutions, and then of course, hope and efficacy, which I kind of really glom onto that last one, because I feel like you could have all 5 of those and they could be textbook perfect. But if your community is without hope, if the folks in Cloverdale can't see themselves on the road to change and to resiliency, then really the other 5, I'm not really sure how effective they are. So those 6 mean a lot to me. So I brought forward, and again, the next 2 documents I brought forward were more of examples that I have used and worked on with other groups. And again, I am not the end-all be-all expert here. I am working in tandem with Health Action, with St. Joseph's Health Community Benefits Department, who are very much involved in bringing resiliency and bringing Laura Porter and her ACEs work to Sonoma County. And then also a consultant, Sarah Rock, who is one of Laura Porter's right arms, if you will. She has right arms all over the country in various states, and Sarah is very much local, semi-local to the Bay Area, and working with myself and St. Joseph's Health on this. So this is just one of those first tools, if you will, the rating sheet. It's a community capacity development index, you know, and you work through these, you score yourself, different members, different focus groups, varying levels of your community. Again, I feel like they kind of speak for themselves, so I won't really dig too much into those, but they also can be tailored to fit the need of the community that we're talking about. And then of course the score at the bottom can, you know, indicate where things are needing improvement, where things are growing and doing well, and maybe things that are not even addressed. So there's that there for you. And then the second page, or sorry, the last page, again, I used to specify this to some health action priority areas. So the 1, 2, and 3 that you see in front of you, long and healthy lives, enough educational attainment to support your life goal or career, and a comfortable standard of living. Those are priority areas for health action, but then again, those can be changed to fit the needs of Cloverdale. And then it's really working through each step to determine the right questions to ask for a long-term goal, which again, here we're talking 2 to 10 years. So far out, I think more than a lot of us tend to think. And then a short-term goal as well, the kind of the expected change you'd want to see within the first 2 years. And as you move through those, you come back down to your 6th, which is basically observations that are going to let you know that you're on the right track. That's the learning, that's the iterative learning cycle, going back, reflecting, making sure that we're always asking the right question from the right perspective. So those are just a couple of the tools that I wanted to share with you this afternoon. I also just wanted to bring to the table just some figures for you as well in terms of dollars. You know, it's city, it's money, it's always about that in some capacity, right? So again, a lot of this work has already been accomplished in the state of Washington in various counties, which are in the slideshow that I had presented back in February. But just to give you a sense of the cost savings about utilizing this model. So this is these are the dollars on the state level. So I just want to be clear about that. I'm just going to kind of read it straight here from my documentation. But cost savings as a result of focusing on preventing and addressing ACEs in Washington were enormous. Per year, avoided caseload costs in child welfare, juvenile justice, and public medical costs associated with births to teen mothers were calculated to be at $27.9 million based on prevented cases between 2002 and 2006. Because of the progressive nature of adversity and associated costs for public services throughout the life course, plus lost tax revenue from productivity loss, the taxpayer savings from coordinating ACE's work from 2002 to 2006, so approximately 4 years, were conservatively estimated at an average of $100 million per year during that time. So in essence, for every dollar spent, $35 were saved in the state of Washington. So if you wanted to scale that down, you could scale that down to county, and you could probably scale that down to local municipality, but I always like throwing out big numbers because they always get everybody's attention. So that's what I wanted to share with you in terms of dollars saved and the cost benefits to the state of Washington. So in essence, that is basically what I wanted to bring to the table to continue the conversation, hoping that this would spark interest within the subcommittee. As I recall from the city council meeting, Mr. Mayor, you brought this back to subcommittee for further discussion. Obviously, COVID kind of kicked the can a little farther down the road in terms of timing, but also I think maybe a silver lining to that is that it does provide the city of Cloverdale with an opportunity to think about these things and how to structure a reopening, the resilience, and overall benefit of public health to the community of Cloverdale. So it could have been a positive for all we know.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, this is, I have a lot of questions, but I want to check in with the mayor first, find out if he has any questions.
Well, just the overall implementation of it, and how that would be done, and who's expected to take charge and run with the lead. Is it the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. So of course, bringing these kinds of models to the table, you're automatically putting up your hand as I'll do the lot of the brunt work. So in Health Action, I think one model that we could look at would be how the Health Action chapter in Sonoma has conducted an extensive community listening group process. I believe they took roughly 12 months to 18 months to thoroughly kind of get in with the community, either in established community groups that were already meeting on a regular basis or creating pop-up discussion groups of their own. But to answer the question with a short answer, I believe this would be where Health Action could come to the table and help support expanding this out into the greater community.
Thank you, Becky.
Yeah, that was mostly my question too, is that how would we go about implementing it in our processes? Like, would we want to integrate it into our goal setting? I can really see us using this framework moving forward, working with the chamber, with the senior center, with food pantry, with the citrus fair, when we really have to come together and plan the economic recovery, as well as some of the fallout and the stressors and the effects of COVID-19. So I guess I'd like to spend a little more time, maybe one-on-one with you, or I hate suggesting that we hand this off to staff, because I already know how maxed out they are. I think that's the stumbling block right there, is how do we implement it in our organization and with the other organizations in Cloverdale, while things are still really in flux. We can't have community meetings. We can't have the regular kind of community engagement that we normally have. So I would imagine that even if we had, you know, a facilitator who's experienced in working with organizations doing this to implement it in communities, they've never implemented it during, you know, a recovery from a pandemic. I'm just going to go out on a limb and suggest that that probably hasn't happened. So yeah, that's kind of what I see to as one of the you know, the main barriers to adoption. So and at this point, Irene, is there any public input or any comments from the public?
There are none.
Okay. Any questions from staff as to, you know, maybe what the next step might be or suggestions?
I like you meeting with her, Melanie, and letting us know what
Oh,
what
thanks.
it is, and how we can help.
Yeah, no.
No
I think that's a good
doubt.
idea, though. There you go. Yeah, I think that might be what we need to do and figure out how we can implement this, because I could definitely see this being part of our, you know, of our budget process, and working with our partners in a normal budget process. But we are not going to have that this year either. So, because it really should be a community conversation about, you know, not only what we want to see for Cloverdale, but how we're going to be working together in the future. And so, you know, maybe we should just kind of stay in contact and try to figure out the best way to start implementing this in, you know, as things arise. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm more than happy to take exactly that question back, because I also would agree. I doubt this has been done during or coming out of a pandemic.
Yeah.
So that said, I have definitely been impressed with the wealth of knowledge and resource and how to facilitate these things. So I'd be more than happy to find that out, and then, you know, come back with you if it's you individually or the group again as a whole. And the other thing that I was thinking of while you were speaking, Madam Chair, was just the meeting we had at the Citrus Fairgrounds post PSPS, and
Kind of the last community meeting.
yeah. And but, you know, and I realized they both work for the city of San Francisco, and they're eyeball deep in all of this. But, you know, my take is, at least, you know, to make an ask to see if we couldn't maybe combine some sort of resources, or if they already had a direction that they were moving in and they're no longer able to facilitate that given their own jobs right now. Is there something Health Action can do to kind of pick that up and continue to carry it so that it's not just lost or sitting dead in the water? I'm open for that too.
Yeah, David, where are we on some of that emergency planning? I know that there have been some issues with our facilitators there, so.
Right. I mean, almost immediately following our last meeting, which we were getting ready to catalog and share that with all attendees, we were confronted with the emergency, and pretty much that was put on hold. And you know, the one positive, well, I shouldn't say one, some positive developments that happened naturally out of the implementation of a response for COVID on the food side. Some strengthening collaboration happening with food distribution, and I think that's something, for instance, that one of the strategies that we wanted to implement as part of resilience. And of course, we need to pick that back up and continue to implement that into, you know, a formal planning document, and hopefully we get through this, and that might be an area that if we do receive some funding assistance in CPD, dedicate a portion of that funding towards our resiliency planning effort, so that we can, you know, basically invest in ourselves and our community. But that'd be a thought for future communication, is how do we reestablish that planning process. 'Cause I think we're making a lot of progress and moving very quickly, and it just was sidelined by the pandemic.
Yeah, so I think that's a good plan. What do you think, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I have to agree with you, but also, Madam Chair, I'd like to meet with you on this, and then maybe the two of us can have a joint meeting with Becky, and we can get our questions answered.
Oh, I think that would be great. Yeah, and yeah, maybe Vicki, you can kind of go back to the source and get, so somebody needs to put themselves on mute. I don't know if that's David, if you have two Zoom meetings going on at once, but somebody's causing some, thank you. That's better. So yeah, Becky, why don't we schedule a call with you and me and Gus, and yeah, maybe after you go back and kind of find out a little bit more about, how cities have implemented this plan, or larger entities, and then we'll kind of go from there. Maybe you can answer some more of our questions at that point. So yeah, but I think that either way, we're gonna need some additional funding for this. So, okay. So you want to keep this on the agenda for, as kind of a standing item, David, for recovery?
That's certainly your choice, Madam Chair. We can keep it on, and you need to bring this back, as we progress, and we were ready to kind of bring it back for more ripe discussion. Obviously, we haven't held the health action meetings either, and I think that's a key committee to help develop this discussion further. And Kevin's our representative on that committee, and I'm sure he would help move this forward in that context.
Kevin does a great job. I'm just going to say it right now.
Of course he does.
Clever.
Great. Okay, so it sounds like we're just gonna stay on this and kind of see where we are with our other emergency preparedness efforts as well, and then Gus and I will look back with Becky with some additional questions, and we'll talk about it at the next meeting. Okay. Any other comments from the public, Irene, or any other questions?
No hands are raised.
Great. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Becky, for coming and giving us an overview again. I think that it's this topic is even more timely than before. I think you're right about that. And I can see this really being a great tool and a great framework for us moving forward, especially with our community partners. So great. And with that, unless there are any other questions, I'm going to move on in the agenda. How about we take a little, since we're at an hour and a half, why don't we take a little 5-minute break and come back? A little leg stretch. Does anybody object to that?
No objections.
All righty, we'll take a 5-minute break and update on Sonoma County homeless emergency response. Oh, that's you, David. You have to unmute yourself.
Madam Chair, I defer to Kevin on this item. I don't have any updates.
Yeah, our last meeting was canceled. There's nothing really new to report other than what I reported at the council meeting. The Sonoma State is open. At last count, there was 67 folks there. Only one from the North County. That's Windsor to the county line. There are some folks still at the Astro Hotel, which is being sponsored by the city of Santa Rosa. I think the intent was to get those folks over to Sonoma State. Yeah, it's the meetings have not been as frequent. I think it's up and running. If somebody wants to go to Sonoma State and they're in the vulnerable population for COVID, they need to speak to Reach for Home, at least in Healdsburg or Cloverdale. They're the referring agency. I don't believe anyone from Cloverdale has taken advantage of it at the last, like as I said, the last I heard, there was one person from Healdsburg. That's,
But if Alexander Valley Healthcare has any referrals, they would go there. I'm
yeah,
assuming.
there's a part of Sonoma State is for COVID positive, and then there's part that's
Mhm.
just vulnerable homeless people. So if you were COVID positive and you wanted to go to Sonoma State to have a recovery time, that would be Alexander Valley. If you were a homeless, vulnerable homeless person, then you'd go through Reach for Home or Alexander Valley, one of the two.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, did you have anything on that?
No, I think we do have one of our residents there, John Bullard, I believe, might be located down there.
Yeah, that could be. I haven't gotten an update in about a week, so that very well could be.
I've been trying to get in touch with him here on the plaza, and nobody's seen him for a few weeks. So, okay, that's it.
Any public comment?
No comments.
All right, seeing that, we'll move on to 6B, update on Measure P and cannabis permits.
Madam Chair, there's a report in the packet providing an update on the Measure P excise tax revenue that's been received at least through April. We would anticipate receiving some revenue through additional revenue for April by the end of June. Obviously, we just started the month, so it doesn't look like we got a full report for April, Susie, when the report was prepared. I don't know if we've received additional reports, since this went out last week, since it provided there's some additional time to get reports in. But this does give a current update on year-to-date totals as well as totals. In addition, the staff has been making progress on completion of the audit reports. Currently, there are 3 audits in process for Beazle, Seed to Soul, and Old River Road. There's a couple of issues that have been brought forward as part of that audit work that we have been discussing with both the city attorney as well as HDL, who's performing the audit. One of the key issues was that the businesses were reporting on a cash basis rather than an accrual basis. And the Measure P ordinance that the council adopted clearly states that they're supposed to report on an accrual basis. So the auditors are working out that detail with the 2 of the 3 cannabis businesses that are subject to the audit. There was one additional nuance with that was raised again during the audit process, and that was because one of the proprietors is receiving rent from the adjacent space, and the ordinance does call for considering rent as part of gross revenue. In this particular instance, we gave feedback to our auditor that we consider rent as rent for the licensed space, not rent from outside the licensed space, so that doesn't become an outside tax on real estate that's maybe owned by the business proprietor. I think that would be favorable for the particular business owner. And then last but not least, a number of jurisdictions, when they make these corrections, do apply penalties and late payments and interest. Our feedback and direction back to the auditors was certainly to note what that would look like so we understand it, but because we perceive that council's perspective on this is really to assist the cannabis businesses to come into compliance and not necessarily to take a punitive approach. So we've given that direction and feedback to our auditors in this process. So really the key kind of finding an issue is that some businesses just really work from a cash basis rather than an accrual basis, which creates a number of complications. but we'll be working on correcting that through the audit process. And then we'll be kickstarting another the audit of Red Door remedies. So that'll be, you know, of 4 of the 5 that will have been subject to an audit. So that concludes an update. And our finance director, Susie Holmes, has been working closely with HDL on the audit work, and we expect to have a report we can bring back to this subcommittee as soon as it's ready.
What was, Gus, do you remember what was the logic of specifying an accrual accounting as opposed to cash accounting in the ordinance? Do you remember that?
Well, you know, I was just, that was one of my questions I had. You know, the retail operations, like Red Door, and anybody that walks in and purchases over the counter, that would be a cash basis. I don't think they're doing credit with anyone there. Somebody like Beazle or Cloverdale Deliveries, they may very well be on an accrual basis. Like Bezos, if he does his project and ships it out, he may invoice them. But yeah, I can't remember though why we decided to do an accrual other than to capture all the sales.
Yeah, I guess, Susie, do you have a reason? Because I mean, just, you know, as a business owner myself, I mean, unless you have the way that I've always seen it in like QuickBooks and everywhere else is that unless you have a really good reason to use accrual accounting, use cash accounting.
Yeah. I think, I'm not sure why, I don't remember the reason for doing accrual, but I do know that cash accounting would be helpful for the cannabis businesses in that if, like you said, if they invoice someone and then they don't pay it, or they pay it late, or then they're out the money that they haven't received yet. So I have heard that statement from a couple of the businesses so far. So they would prefer that, but I don't know of a reason that you would do accrual versus cash.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I guess, Susie, if that scenario was to come to light, you know, all of a sudden now, you know, we help eat the loss of the business. I would think to some extent. I don't know. I'd have to chew on this for a minute. But one thing I'd like to see on the report, Susie, is if you can, I don't know how much trouble, some type of an annual total. Like here we go from October 2018 through April of 20. If there's any way we can put a total after September, even if it's just in parentheses, you know, and yes.
Gus, it says from July 1st through current. There's also a fiscal year. Do you see that on the report?
I see penalties and, oh, are you down the bottom?
You know, I don't have it up in front of me. Give me 1 second.
I see year to date, and then I see totals.
So year to date is what we've received from July 1st through April.
Gotcha.
And then the totals are from October through current.
Okay.
And then showing the revenue based on that year to date and then total gross revenue.
Okay. All right. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah. And we
Yeah, but
have received an additional $8,000 since this report was published and the payment was due.
Yeah. Well, Madam Chair, I think at some point we have to come back and think really hard on the cash / accrual, and then also take the request that's been made on being more flexible with some of the fees, the annual fees, permits.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I think we might have, it just seems like it seems the cash versus accrual seems like a little bit of a wild hair maybe. If there's there was a good reason for it originally, I just kind of want to figure that out. If not, that just needs to be changed to be, you know, maybe it's just not even a requirement, is that because if the ordinance is applying to all of the cannabis businesses, you know, a retail business is going to be fundamentally different from a wholesaler in this instance. So let's try to unravel that, figure that out a little bit better. But yeah, on both of those items, yeah, let's work on that next. Let's hear more about it at the next meeting.
Yeah, there was considerable conversation and discussion by the council when they were discussing whether it's a cash basis or a accrual basis. And I think accrual was intended to reflect what they actually report in terms of sales. And then obviously, because the cannabis market's still developing, I think the actual payment, there's still a lot of uncertainty, so it doesn't necessarily still work yet like a traditional business. Because certainly our like our city, we work on an accrual basis. The tricky part, which we'll have to seek legal counsel, is because this was enacted by the voters with that language, you know, what flexibility we have to change it without going back out to a vote.
Well, you know, as I sit here, I think accrual would be better because, you know, on a cash basis, it's when the money actually comes in, as opposed to an accrual, it's based off of the sale. So if they have $1 million in sales and 100,000 of that is on an IOU or an invoice, they still pay on the $1 million. And that's what we want to capture is total sales, not how much cash came in.
Right, and that's one of the complaints, and I understand what you're saying, that you want to capture it when the sale happened, but they're saying, but we haven't received any cash to pay the tax.
Well, that's not to be harsh, but they have to tighten their business practices.
Yeah, I don't agree with that though, because I think that you choose the accounting type based on the kind of business that you are. And I think that what we did was that we threw a big blanket over all of the businesses, and it's not an appropriate accounting method for all of them. I mean, I understand the issue about, but there's got to be a way to get the reporting that we do need for our purposes based on cash accounting. Because that is the best accounting method for that type of business. I just, I mean, I understand it's going to be easier to get the numbers we're after with accrual. However, yeah, this is not, and also I'm not happy with how out of normal this is either. The sales tax, California Sales Tax Bureau doesn't dictate the accounting method for businesses when they're collecting sales tax. And, you know, I think this is another instance where we might have gotten ahead of our skis policy-wise, and made a requirement that is just, it's onerous to certain types of businesses. So I'm concerned about this.
So Madam Chair, David, you're saying that the initiative was for an accrual basis, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The ordinance, as approved by the voters, did reflect the requirement was on an accrual basis. And again, that's why we wanted to.
Are we making it really clear to businesses when they apply then that they are required to use accrual accounting?
I'm fairly sure we do, but I mean, you know, I guess we if, you know, what role you'd like staff to play in terms of providing an overview of how they do their books. I think that's why we proposed going through this process with them, was to identify kind of best practices, and obviously if there's issues to be able to bring it back to council to get that policy direction. And that's why we didn't want to take a punitive approach at all. It's really about getting them into compliance and helping them understand, you know, what the ordinance is.
Because when I'm setting up my business, I'm talking to my accountant and I'm talking to them about what is the best way for me to run this business. And sometimes the answer is accrual and sometimes it is cash. But if I'm not told up front that one of the requirements that, you know, as you're going through the application, this is one of your check boxes. Make sure that you are using the accrual accounting method, because that's going to be part of the reporting process. If you know, if we gotta pick what we're going to do, and we so either we are going to say that there, you know, if we identify some issues in the ordinance that are cleanup items in a, you know, I mean, I don't want to spend money on this either, but if we identify some, you know, mistakes that were made that need to be corrected, we need to be able to take those to the voters and say, you know, in this emerging industry, we need to make a course correction. So we've got to put it before the voters, or we got to change our operations and make it very, very clear to people going forward. Yeah, this sucks. We're sorry. It's in the ordinance language, and this is what you have to do. But, you know, we have to do one of those two things.
Well, I would also think that, and I don't know, Jose is going to have to weigh in on this, needless to say, but I tend to think that if we went to the voters, we wouldn't have to go and ask for the tax again. We just have to go and ask for a change in on what we require the businesses to report on. And maybe we give
an excise tax. Do you have to do a new measure, David?
Yeah, that's I'm not certain if the methodology for, you know, changing the ordinance language in this particular instance, and this is just an issue we literally discussed today with HDL. So we're going to learn more, and so what I'm sharing with you is just information that we really started to chew on today with HDL, and, you know, ultimately that's why we want to bring it back to council for your input.
And
yeah, I mean, I'm not placing any blame. This is what happens when you're building the plane while you're flying it.
Yeah.
You know?
Susie?
We can also, in the introduction letter where we tell them, you know, how to process and how to, you know, these are the forms you use, and this is when you pay. We can actually change that letter to say that it will be based on accrual basis.
Okay. All right. Any comments from the public? Questions from staff?
Comments?
No comments? Okay, great. So more to come. Thanks for the update. That was very helpful. I mean, it sounds like, you know, you're making progress, and you're kind of you're inventing this as you go along. So I mean, thanks so much for all of your hard work on this, and your patience too. But, you know, we're not going to get everything right the first time. It's just not going to happen. So with that, we'll move on to item C, update on pension liability legislation.
Madam Chair, this is just a standing item. We don't have any updates at this particular time. I do anticipate there will be forthcoming discussion on this post COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, it's a hot topic. Actually, we'll be talking about this at my government transparency and labor relations legislative meeting on Thursday with the league. So yeah, this is it's getting even more dire than it was. So I'm sure we'll be hearing more about it in the future. Is there an update on the development of draft ordinance to address downtown vacancies? I think we decided to shelve that for the time being.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, we had brought it to subcommittee, and then I wrote a agenda report looking for direction on about 3 or 4 different items regarding that, but then we decided to wait.
You know, Mr. Mayor, I think we'll be in hold mode on that one.
For quite a while.
For a while,
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Assembly Bill 5, worker status, employees and independent contractors. Is there an update?
No updates. I keep trying to look to see if there's going to be some movement on this. I think everyone's kind of focused on addressing, you know, how we're going to work our way out of COVID, and I hope that maybe a part of a larger legislative package will be something on the AB5.
Yeah, I think the last thing I heard before the stay-at-home order was that this is a work in progress. That they're aware that it is an issue for a lot of folks, and addressing employees that they never intended it to address. So, I mean, yeah, hopefully we'll see this get worked on this year. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Mayor? No. Okay. And financial planning.
Mayor, and Madam Chair, this item is just a general standing item to discuss all matters related to the financial standing of the city. And what we are currently doing is refining and making final changes to the draft fiscal year 2021 budget. And I haven't received any comments back from council. And we're preparing to bring forward essentially the budget that was reviewed by council at your last meeting, with the exception of some minor updates that we've received from Michael Coleman, as well as just some really minor tweaks and adjustments to some of the expenditure items in the budget, but nothing substantive that comes to mind. Obviously, it stands that we'll be bringing it forward with a substantial operational deficit for the fiscal year, with the utilization of reserve balances, and we'll report that in the staff report.
Right.
But,
The only substantial change that was made was for a mower that was listed as a parks vehicle. And so I moved it out to our discretionary list until we saw how revenues were. But I was told today that it was necessary that they have that and that it's essential. So we did put $38,000 in there for a mower.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, did you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of gave my input at the council meeting. And I'm sure we're going to see more on this topic in the coming months. So future agenda items. Mr. Mayor, did you have anything? Other than the options for funding street improvements and paving, which looks like it's also a standing item. Did you have
Yes.
anything else?
Nothing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, nothing. Okay. Anything from staff or is there anything from the public, Irene?
There is no public.
No public.
No public. Okay, great. We bored them to death. That's my goal. And let's see, I'm moving. So did you have anything for us on options for street improvements, David?
Staff does not have any options. I think this is something we want to get a firm understanding of what tax revenue numbers that we anticipate including in our budget, and then be able to present what we can actually perform in terms of a project, in terms that council has identified, particularly for 4th Street.
Okay. Yeah, and our last subcommittee meeting, we briefly discussed some of the funding issues or funding sources like the utility tax renewal and possible sales tax on future ballot. Do you have any update for us on that?
I did just today. We received the questionnaire, and we're going to be reviewing that and giving feedback to our polling consultant, and then it would be once that's finalized, the goal would be to start the polling work fairly quickly.
Okay, great.
I'm supposed to be
I hear people are answering their phones these days.
Right. We understand that there's increased survey response right at this particular period of time.
Yep, that's sounding good. Okay. All right, and with that, any pending items? Good of the
Okay.
order? Okay. I just have one item. I heard from Kevin Fixler from the Press Democrat today. He contacted me regarding our utility tax renewal. I guess he's doing a story on sales taxes that will be on the ballot. And I pointed him to our minutes from a last meeting where we discussed where we are with the utility tax and a possible sales tax. Also, all of this kind of in the light of the SCTA tax renewal. So we'll probably, knock on wood, be seeing a story with that in the PD in the next couple of days, unless anything else happens that's gonna, bump stories like that. So just to keep you aware that he did contact me regarding that. So, Mr. Mayor, anything else go to the order?
Nothing, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, well, hearing none and not seeing wild gesticulations from Irene, I believe we're going to adjourn to our next meeting, which is Tuesday, July 7th at 4 p.m. So thanks, everybody. It's nice to see your faces and great job. And thanks so much to staff for all of your hard work and your long hours. We really appreciate it.